So victim witness services.
There's like a 5-second delay when you turn.
This is, I know as a police officer, I think one of the most important things that we offer. Because oftentimes when people encounter police or the criminal justice system, especially as a victim of a crime, there's often, we're not great at that as cops. We're not great at taking care of all their needs because that's not really our job. So I think this is one of the most valuable services that we have that we can lean on as police for our community to help strengthen those community bonds and really help people navigate that system and then also hopefully not be victimized again later. So I'd like to welcome these ladies to the stage. I have Danielle, Rachel, and Megan.
Hi everybody, my name's Danielle Tuber. I am a victim witness coordinator with the Ada County Prosecutor's Office. I did work for the police department, Boise City Police Department for 22 years, and I've been here at the prosecutor's office for about 3.
And I'm Megan Kenley. I work at the Ada County Sheriff's Office in Victim Services, and I've been there about almost 2 years.
And my name is Rachel Murphy. I'm a victim witness coordinator with the Garden City Police Department, and I've been there about 5.5 years now. Okay, so I'm just going to begin with making initial victim contact. So at the beginning, we will work a case from the criminal investigation all the way through prosecution. So what that can look like is we can be called out. One of us is on call. I share on call actually with the Ada County Sheriff's Office, so there's about 6 of us all together. We'll share on call. We're on call for 1 week at a time, 24/7. So that means, yes, it can mean a 2 a.m. phone call, and it can mean multiple phone calls all in the same day. And so when we arrive out there, we are there to provide resources, and in addition to providing resources that night, which can mean a taxi to a hotel, making sure that they get medical needs, if they need transportation, things such as that. And so what that all entails is making sure that they get resources at that given time. And then after that, if we're called out to, say, a domestic violence call, the next morning we will have what's called domestic violence core. And in regards to that, we will go out and then, sorry, I've been on call right now, so I'm a little tired, but in regards to that, we'll meet with a prosecutor. They will answer any questions that they have about the court process. And then at that time, I think the microphone just died. So I will try and be as loud as I can. I'm a bit quiet. But so at that time at DV4, what we do out there is provide resources. If they need counseling, again, medical attention, if they need, housing resources, things like that, we'll discuss that at that time. And it's really helpful that a prosecutor is there because if there's an arrest that night, say we got called out to a domestic violence case, they make an arrest, the next day there will be what's called video arraignments. So we want to make sure that they're aware of what's occurring at that time. So we meet, like I said, with the prosecutor, myself, or another victim witness coordinator, and the victim. We discuss what's going to occur, video arraignments, what they would like to see out of the case. And then after we discuss what's going to occur at video arraignments, we also make sure that they're aware that if they would like to view video arraignments, that they have the opportunity to do so. So right now, all video arraignments, the initial appearance is virtual. So we just set them up with a link, or if they don't have access to that, we can have them come to our our office, or we can have them go right there at Faces of Hope, set up a computer, and then we'll make sure that they can watch video arraignments at that time. But that's really the initial contact that we have with them, is either we are called out or the following day we get their information and then we'll call them and discuss things from there. And that really goes along with notifying victim of court dates as well. So at time of arrest, next day, we are notifying them what that court procedure looks like. If it's something like there is no arrest and it's a write-in route, we make sure we still call them, notify them of what's going on, and then answer any questions that following day.
And really, these services are their choice, right? If they don't want any services, they don't have to have any services from us. So it's a way of empowering victims to give them that control back to make decisions. So we'll just explain the process and let them decide how they want to be involved. Sorry, I know I interrupted you. Okay.
So one thing with the sheriff's office is we all have different specialties, and so the reason that I'm here is that I have a specialty in refugees and veterans, and so it's especially important. We all work all different types of crimes, all different cases, but I specifically go to trainings and I get resources to do with the refugee population and veterans. And so, it helps being a liaison from attorneys to law enforcement to the victim, but then I also can work with case managers and different refugee facilities to, reach out to the victim, make sure that they're in contact, that they're getting those resources that they need. And so that could be either answering questions for them, providing updates on the court process, or if they're still in the investigation stage, getting those updates as well. And so if the victim decides that they do want to use a case manager as, a source of updates, that's something that we can absolutely do. And as long as we get their consent, we can do that. We usually just try and streamline to one source to notify. So if that's what they want, they can absolutely do that, but they also are welcome to refuse that at any time and be that main point of contact. But it helps so then they're able to understand more of the court process, because coming here, they really don't, it's very different from where they came from. So it's kind of helpful.
So victim witness coordinators get assigned to any case that's violent in nature automatically. And periodically, there will be something that will come up, like let's say, we wouldn't typically get assigned to a burglary charge, for instance, or maybe a malicious injury to property, but there could be some nuances about that particular crime that maybe are more domestic violence in nature. So those are case by case for us, but anything you can think of where there is a victim of a violent crime, whether it's a misdemeanor or felony, a victim witness coordinator is going to be assigned from one of the very agencies. I mean, we've got 3 agencies represented here, Garden City, the Sheriff's Office, and I'm with the Prosecutor's Office, but there are victim witness coordinators at the Boise Police Department, at the Meridian Police Department, and also at the Boise City Attorney's Office. All right, where are we? Okay. So once the case is filed, whether it's with one of the differing prosecuting agencies, that's when victims' rights kick in. So Idaho has a constitutional amendment for victims' rights, and there are about 9 or 10 of them. And if anybody's interested, I did bring some brochures that talk about what all those rights are. It also has a little piece in here about the criminal justice process, whether it's misdemeanor or felony. So if anybody's interested in kind of learning how that goes, I had brought a bunch of these. But essentially, victims have rights to be notified of all the court hearings, for someone to explain the process to them, for them to be involved as far as being heard in court, whether it's at a sentencing to explain to the judge the impact the crime has had on them, whether it's to talk about their position on whether somebody is could potentially be released. So it's our job as victim service providers to ensure that those rights are adhered to.
Yeah, so it's really just ensuring that they have their rights, but also making sure that they have the resources moving forward that they want. So up there on the slide, it says provide community resources and referrals. And so we work a lot with the Faces of Hope Foundation, but also the Women and Children's Alliance. They're both nonprofits here in Ada County that do amazing things for victims. And they provide a lot of resources free of charge. So if anyone's interested, I believe we also have some information in regards to those two nonprofit agencies here as well.
One thing I'd like to add to that too is that a lot of times we can use those facilities, but then also we can arrange taxis for people, we can get them hotels. So we really just want to make sure that their basic needs are met and that they're in a safe environment when we're making contact with them.
So when it comes to the point of a case maybe going to some sort of a hearing where it would require a victim to testify, part of our job then becomes to have them come in. We sit down with them with the prosecutor and help them prepare for that hearing. So the prosecutor can tell them exactly what questions that they're going to be asked. We can get them to a courtroom where we can show them, this is what it looks like. I think a lot of times, this process is so foreign to everybody. They have no idea what this is going to look like, and for most people, I think that's the scariest thing, is when something is unknown to you. I think your brain tends to maybe make it be worse than it potentially could be. And so our job is just to prepare people so that they are not surprised by things the best that we can. So showing them a courtroom, and sometimes even for our little ones, we work with little kids who something terrible has happened to. And so there are times when they would have to testify, unfortunately. There's not very many ways around that, but we do our best to have them come in. We can have them sit in the chair when there's nobody in the courtroom and kind of practice that so they kind of get an idea about how that's going to feel. And we can do as many prep meetings for that as needed. Same thing for victims who are, vulnerable, or this is a very scary process. We will do everything that we can to make this be as easy as we can. Let's see. All right, so we were also, we've been talking a lot about what we do, but they also asked it to kind of go into a little bit about what we don't do. And that is, we would never interact with the defendant in a case. We're not allowed to do that. They would have an attorney, and so the only communication with the defendant would be from a prosecutor to that defendant's attorney. So we would never be involved in that. We are also never allowed to collect any sort of evidence. So a lot of times you'll have somebody call you, a victim of a crime will call, and they will have new information, whatever that new information is. But we're not allowed to be the person to take that information from them. We would have to stop them and say, I'm really sorry, but what we need to do now is either get somebody from law enforcement or maybe an investigator from the prosecutor's office to contact you, gather that information, write a police report, and then route it through the proper channels, because that information has to be shared with the defense in any case. So sometimes that can be very frustrating because victims want an opportunity to talk to, and we might be the first person that they're talking to. So for them to understand that you're going to be heard, we just have to do it the right way. We also cannot provide any legal advice. So I get questions all the time about, what should I do about any sort of a civil issue, property, divorce, child custody. I cannot give them any advice about what to do in that situation. So we would then refer them to community resources. So there are several resources in the community where a victim could qualify to have legal representation. So I would refer them out to those places so that they could ask those questions and get the proper answers. The other piece of this is that a lot of times, so our role is different than, let's say, a community-based advocate, like somebody at Faces of Hope or somebody at the Women's and Children's Alliance. They would, or a counselor, for instance, they would have confidentiality, so anything a victim would tell them, they would not have to share with anybody else. That is not true for us. Any information that we get about the case, we have to then share with the prosecutor, who would then have to share it with the defense attorney. So that's the difference in our roles versus somebody who's an advocate for victims in the community. And then this is a big one too. Victims want copies of police reports. We cannot give them those. They can access them through public records, and we can explain, depending on what agency took the initial report, we can explain to them how to get that. However, when a case is pending, generally they're not going to get a copy of the police report until the case is over. Once the case is over, then that is public record and anybody could get a copy of it. But for the integrity of the case, prosecutors want to make sure that a witness's memory is their memory, and it's not based on what they've read that somebody else has said. So if we were to give people copies of police report, yeah, 5 minutes, thank you.
Yeah, so at Garden City, if a victim wants a copy of a police report, they can just request that through our records public information request form. We have it online, or they can call in, or they can come to the actual police department to request those records. But like Danielle mentioned, the case has to have some sort of disposition before we're allowed to release that information by law. So it can take a little bit because court cases can stem for a year long sometimes. I mean, the court is unfortunately a bit slower than I think what we would all like it to be at times.
All right, sorry, we're gonna have to speed through these. So there's the big one, I think, is there are plenty of victims who don't want to testify. They don't want to be involved in the case. They didn't want charges in the first place, which is common in a lot of cases, especially domestic violence, because that's a very unique dynamic. So the thing that we have to remind them is that they're not the ones pressing charges. It's the state. It's the state of Idaho who's pressing charges. And so we have ways to help kind of alleviate that fear when somebody has to testify. For instance, we can ask them, do you want to be here? Are you under subpoena? Would you be here if you weren't? I think it gives them a little bit of, makes them feel a little bit better to know that the defendant is now not going to be really mad at them because they're wanting these charges to go forward. Plus, if anybody's needed to testify, they will get a subpoena, and that is a court order to appear. We try really hard to work to get cases resolved so that people never have to testify, but we can never guarantee that. So sometimes we're in a position where that's the only option that we have. Do you want to talk about language lines?
Yeah. Yeah, so one thing that we can do is, if we have somebody who doesn't speak English, we have language lines that we can use. And so that's our job. We can arrange interpreters for over the phone or in-person meetings or for in the court. And that's, again, we can use Language Line, which has a whole access of different languages to utilize. Mainly when I use it, I'll use Swahili. Or we have, for the courts, we have the Trial Court Administrator's Office, and those are court certified interpreters that can help us throughout that process as well. And then some of our victim witness coordinators are bilingual as well, so we can utilize them in any time that we need to as well. We can also utilize victims' families and friends. We try not to utilize them for any court process or anything to do with court, just because that can be a little bit hard to transfer over and understand. And so a lot of times it's just basic questions that we'll utilize them for if needed.
Yeah, so I would add on to that. I have talked to family members or friends, say if we need to set up a meeting with a victim and their family friend speaks English, sometimes to set that initial meeting up, it's easier if we discuss with them first, if they're okay with the family friend discussing that with us. Of course, we always get consent before we do that. But that way we can set up that initial meeting and then make arrangements for whoever, the translation line to be there, or if we need a court interpreter as well, they can be with meetings as well.
Okay, questions? guys are letting us off easy?
It's lunch.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. Okay, so we do have some resources here. If anybody's interested, just let me know. We'll be at the back table for a little bit. So if you have questions that you, go
So
ahead.
like with the increase in like rent and all these life stressors, have you guys seen an increase in, your guys' job having to step in due to, these types of stressors?
For sure, for sure. COVID, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
was rough. And I think it's still kind of trickling. And so, yeah, I get that question a lot, especially for domestic violence victims, right? Who
Yeah.
somebody's now gone to jail who may be the primary breadwinner or at least half the income.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
So in this last month, I've helped, I think, 4 victims of domestic violence that the bread maker is in jail, and we've helped them get into housing. I work with the Health and Welfare Service and Navigation. So I just want to see, because we are seeing a big increase
Yeah.
in domestic violence, victims are applying for assistance.
Yeah, so our agencies don't have like a pot of money that we can then hand out to folks. So that's when we really rely on community resources. So, there's the standards, Jesse Tree of Idaho, Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, 211 for just regular community resources. Having people go to Faces of Hope, for instance, and do an intake with them, and then they can also help advocate for different resources in the community. Sometimes it's a matter of maybe, okay, we can't necessarily give you money to pay your car payment or your phone bill, but maybe we could help you with some other things. Maybe help you get your utilities paid. Maybe we can help you with some groceries that could, defer money here, and then it frees up money to go to these other bills. But yeah, it's huge, and so we really do rely on all the community resources.
Do you have any other questions? All right, thank you, ladies, very much.